So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the mask connection between 2001 and 2015, or 2002, 2016, roughly the same. And I want to talk about why I think this succeeds where this fails. Both of these, first of all, it has nothing to do with the aesthetic of the masks. I think both masks are quite nice, but both of these masks and both of these series are designed around the gimmick, the mask game as I call it, where the mask is essentially designed to be knocked off, to be hit in some way so that it can be dislodged from the character. However, they both approach this concept in very different ways. One that I call a clutch connection, one that I call a clasp connection. And because of this, they function very differently. And in fact, this one is worse, arguably. So why do I say that? Well, first things first. The way that this mask is designed is with a clasp on the inside. Two bits of plastic roughly around the center of the mask, top to bottom, connect to some divots on each side of the head. When it is connected, it's a reasonably strong connection. However, because of the way it is connected, hitting the mask from the front or even from the top, in all honesty, is likely going to push the mask inward further, securing it more to the head. Also, because this is designed to very slightly stress the plastic on each side here, that stress wants to be relieved, right? It wants to find its sort of equilibrium. And so when the mask is knocked off partially, it's going to do one of two things most likely. It is either going to snap forward because it wants to relieve that stress, or it's going to want to snap back into place because that also allows it to relieve that stress, right? So essentially, in concept, this mask cannot be loosened. Yes, there are a handful of scenarios where you can hit it and it loosens the mask a little bit, but we're disregarding that. It's not designed to be loosened. On the other hand, though, looking at the Gen 1 mask, this mask connects via a stud in an anti-stud, and this uses clutch, essentially grabbing onto that stud from four sides to hold it in place. It is also a biased connection, meaning that it is not in the center, but it's actually towards the bottom of the mask in this case, and that's actually really important because these sets do not exist within a vacuum. They exist alongside other sets. In this case, you have the Taraga, you have the McDonald's Matoran, and of course you have the Rahi and their combination models, all of which are able to participate in this mask game. All of which are capable of knocking masks off, some better than others, sure, but there is also some internal consistency with each of these waves. However, in accordance with Generation 2, though these sets do not exist in a vacuum either, the protectors, for all intents and purposes, do not have a function that facilitates knocking these masks off. And for all intents and purposes, the G2 Rahi, the Lord of Skull Spiders, does not have a function that works with this either, at least not particularly well. What this function is weak to, the way that it is designed to be removed, is in two ways. Either via connecting to the back of the mask with a hook-shaped weapon and pulling forward, right? Meaning that a weapon needs to come down from behind it, needs to roughly come forward so it actually hooks underneath the mask and continue that arc downward and forward in order for this mask to have any hopes of being knocked off. There are obviously other ways you can knock the mask off too, but that is where it is most susceptible. The second weakness, if you will, the second way that it is designed to be removed is via the eye stalk, right? Pushing on the back of the eye stalk engages a sort of lever mechanism that pushes up on the eye stalk in the front. This little bit of plastic on the front here is designed to collide with a little nub of plastic. You can see it right in the center of the inside forehead. However, not each of these masks are designed equally. Some of them, the clasp is harder. Some of them, the clasp is weaker. It holds to the face less. Some of them have a larger protruding piece of plastic towards the top, some smaller, etc. Right? So there is some variability, and because of that, there are some masks that are weaker than others. Because this mask uses the same connection, all of the masks from 2001 have roughly the same clutch power. 2002, modifies this slightly with the Nuva masks because of how thick the plastic is. That's a separate story, but suffice to say, this works really well with how the weapons are designed to work. When we take a look at Headless Tahu over here, the arms swing up and down. The same is also true for the masks for the characters for Generation 2, right? However, in this case, you don't need anything hook shaped because this mask is weak to any hit from the top down. It doesn't matter the trajectory. It doesn't matter if the hit is coming towards the mask, if the hit is going away from the mask. None of that matters. It also doesn't even matter if it hits the side. The other thing I wanted to mention, as I talked about with stress relief on this mask and how it's not really capable of being loosened, this mask is designed so that it has a sort of cumulative effect, meaning that the more I hit this mask, the weaker that connection is going to be, because each hit will subsequently add to the how secure that mask is attached to the head. You may have seen this yourself when playing with these sets, for example, where by hitting the mask, you maybe don't knock it off, but you knock it kind of loose and it twists sideways or something along those lines. And so because of that, successive hits actually loosen the mask and weaken its connection until eventually it falls off. And that feels really good, because it means with each hit that you connect, you're more likely to knock the mask off if you don't get it the first time. That is not true for this one, because each time you hit this mask, if you don't knock it off, it is most likely going to reset, meaning it's going to be right back in the position where it was to begin with, and you're basically starting from scratch. You could have hit it one time, you could have hit it 100 times, and there's no cumulative effect. Again, there are certain scenarios where sometimes, it knocks it loose or whatever, and it kind of holds in a central position, and that is what I'd consider a fluke rather than an intentional design. So what about next? As I mentioned, the vacuum, right? I talk about this because when I look at a set like the McDonald's Matoran or Tohunga sets, these not only also include masks which use the same gimmick, although the head is polypropylene this time and actually has less of a secure clasp on it, or clutch power on it, and so because of that, these masks are a little bit easier to knock off, which I like. These are smaller characters, they're weaker characters. That's pretty cool, just like how the Toa Nuva masks are harder to knock off and they're supposed to be more powerful Toa, right? It's really cool stuff. It's really fun to pay attention to that. But long story short, this set is capable of knocking masks off via this punch here, and of course the discs as well. It's difficult, don't get me wrong. I have thrown discs and I have been able to knock masks off with them because they do deal a decent amount of force, but it's by no means as strong as a slice with a sword or an axe or something. This punch, however, is actually reasonably powerful and is pretty good at knocking masks off, especially when it's on these polypropylene heads. The same also holds true for the Turaga, which, yes, I am showing you a custom build here, but ignoring that for a moment, these Turaga have arms that swing up and down on a function, and so you're actually incentivized to hold the staff towards the bottom so that the point in which you want to contact the mask is as far away from that pivot point as possible. That is going to translate the most force to the tip of those weapons, right? These aren't exceptionally good at removing masks, but they are capable of doing it. And of course, you have the Rahi as well. We take a look, for example, at this Rahi here, and this is capable of knocking masks off quite easily, even though this was a $15 set. And man, I wish I lived in a day and age where I could still get this 2 of these for $15. Fantastic stuff. But suffice to say, you'll notice that the wings on this model utilize this piece here. I brought this up in a recent video, and it's why I want to talk about it again. If you own the Nui Rama, I would like you to experiment with this. First things first, take the Nui Rama and remove these flexible axles and replace them with rigid axles, black axles of roughly the same size. The first thing you will notice is that when using the function, the wings will not contact each other. They don't come close enough together to contact, and in fact, are about far enough apart that they don't even hit the mask where they stop. That's not a major issue because, of course, you're going to be moving the Rahi, your opponent is going to be moving the Toa, and so yeah, you're still pretty likely to make contact either way. But because this is flexible, instead of these wings coming together and stopping when the function has reached its limit, it will carry over that momentum and they will snap together and you will hear it. It is an audible sound. So if you test that with the Nui Rama, you'll hear them actually connect. The tips of these wings are hard plastic. On top of that, because they are flexible, they behave sort of like a whip. Again, translating that motion down and amplifying it the further it goes. So not only do these contact, it actually deals a decent amount of force. It's very easy to knock masks off with the Nui Rama when you've kind of played around with it, practiced with it, and it is still the weakest of the Rahi. So the fact that it is capable of doing that, in my experience, more so capable than just a typical Toa, that's really smart, right? Because it very easily could have been a situation like the Lord of Skull Spider set, where yeah, it has a really cool function, maybe the execution isn't the best, but what does that function do? Does it knock these masks off? Not especially. It is capable of grabbing, but because of the way the function works and because of how long the arms are, it's likely the plastic will flex and let go of the mask before it ever gets contact and pulls the mask off. It is sublime to look at this. On top of all of that, something else I wanted to mention, because again, these masks do not exist within a vacuum, is that these masks are on heads which are designed to move, which means that head and that movement is going to take some of that force, right? These heads, when they came out, were designed on necks that did not move. So the mask takes all of the force. On top of that, when you look at the Toa Mata sets, they don't have built-up shoulders at all. And where they do have built-up shoulders, all of the sets are roughly the same, meaning that when you have the head on here, there's nothing to really interfere with your attack, right? There's no armor protecting the head or nothing going around the head to keep you from contacting it. Whereas with the Uniter sets and with the Master sets, many of them have larger pauldrons around the shoulders or larger like spike pieces like Liwa Master, Kobaka Master, right? And those can prevent you from hitting the mask in certain scenarios, right? But other sets lack that, meaning there's no internal consistency between these sets, even though they are all supposed to technically be the same characters, right? It's why when I look at the Toa Mata and I look at their weapons, I'm in awe of the design, because each of the weapons is as capable as the others in knocking off the masks. You look at it, for example, and you look at a character like Onua or Gali, who have hook-shaped masks, who in theory should have an easier time knocking masks off, but the trade-off with those masks being hook-shaped with those weapons being hook-shaped, is that they're shorter, right? So A, their range is shorter, and B, the contact point that you really want to hit with is closer to that pivot point, which reduces its force, right? The closer you get to the point at which the arm rotates around the body, the less and less force you have to work with. It is a really cool trade-off. Obviously, they also trade off the fact that they have two hands instead of one, because they do have these smaller weapons. So yeah, they've got less range, but they get to attack twice as fast, right? All of these sets do a fantastic job, and you're really at no advantage no matter which of the Toa Mata sets you choose, with maybe the exception of Pohatu, since he kicks instead of swinging arms. And that's only because the position at which the arm swings is further away from the mask, so there's a difference there. But the weapons themselves are still just as capable as other weapons from the same line, from the same wave, at knocking masks off. It is really, really impressive. And the same even holds true for the combination models with the Rahi as well. All of them really handle this superbly. It's why I am, like I said, I'm in awe of these designs. When you play with a set like the, well, I've got it right here, so I might as well grab it. Like the, why can't I think of the name? The Kehu, for example. This is capable of getting to that head. Not quite fitting the whole head in the mouth, though you can do it from the side here, right? And you can knock masks off easily. With the exception... Goodbye, Tahu. With the exception of this combination model, each of the other combinations are extremely capable of knocking masks off, and are designed in such a way to accommodate those masks, right? The Nui Jaga, for example, have a heavy tail that strikes from above. The Terracotta have arms which, while not as heavy as that tail, have a longer range and so can deal a similar amount of damage or even more, and again sort of come at you with a downward thrust. Yeah, it's an extension, but you see the actual part that's moving, and that is going down, right? The Kanera and Muwaka have a bite that is large enough to fit any of the G1 masks inside, or sorry, any of the Wave 1 masks inside of it. You can fit all of them in that mouth, and that's really smart because it's very easy to have changed up that geometry. But I feel like they thought of this stuff. The Manus are really the only ones that are different, and I understand it because they do exist separately from the other sets, being that they are electronic. I've never built the Manico, so I don't know roughly if its hand arc, if you will, is at the height of a Toa head or not, but at the very least I know it's at the height of the other Manus, right? So anyway, long video, I know. Before I end this one, the character I was originally going to feature when talking about G2 was this one right here. You may have seen him in the background of other videos. This isn't mine, by the way. This is heavily inspired, if not identical, to a build that was created by this person over here on TTV, which is not an HF fan, something along those lines. This will be linked in the description, but the same is true for this mask. I was going to use it as an example, and then realized it's just easier to, talk about the heads themselves and not have to worry about the clunky bodies. Second of all, the other thing I wanted to focus on before I end the video is, again, because I focused on a G1 Rahi, looking at the G2 Rahi here, in this case obviously being the Lord of Skull Spiders, which, while having a really awesome function, it doesn't really work well enough to sort of justify, honestly, its entire existence. I would have revamped this. In fact, I have revamped this, and this is what I ended up making. Spooks. You can check this out over on the Discord as well. I can't find the instructions I had for it, but I do at the very least have the studio file, and it is free. You can just open it up and throw it all together yourself. Also, the last thing I wanted to mention before ending this video, because I planned on talking about it in a separate video, two things. This piece right here is another flexible piece. I pulled it out when I was pulling out this, and we were talking about pieces like this on Discord, so I thought I'd mention it here. It's a really interesting piece, has nothing to do with this video, by the way, but if you're not familiar with it, it comes from the Snap line. It's a horrible name. Anyway, but it comes from like the early 2000s, and what's really interesting is it is flexible. It does bend, but it doesn't translate that rotation, meaning that, or preserves rotation. That's a better way to put it. So when I rotate this side will also rotate. It doesn't twist along its line. It resists torsion, right? Whereas axles like this do not resist that torsion. You can see it twists. It's a really neat piece, but it's a very obscure piece. I guess you're probably not super familiar with it if you weren't around during that time. And because of that flexibility, it means it can translate that motion through even like an angle like this. It will still rotate. It's a really cool piece. The other thing I wanted to mention too, because I covered the bootleg set yesterday, I forgot to mention this sword comes in that set. You just get one, and it's a neat piece. Lego, I don't think, has anything like it. It is unique, and it's flat silver, which is a good. It's like a perfect match for Lego's modern current silver. So yeah. Okay, long video. I apologize, and yeah, if you saw the last video, I apologize that it didn't have audio. OBS did a thing. So hopefully you enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, especially for videos like this. I know it's a long one, but suffice to say, it is something I just really wanted to talk about. And of course, you can help this video go further. First off, ring the notification bell if you want to, but also let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think about the mask game gimmick from Generation 1 to Generation 2 Bionicle? One of the things I wanted to say is that a lot of people complain about the G2 masks being too easy to remove when you move the head around, which I have to agree with. So it's so weird that they went with this design instead of the old one. I don't know. Like, honestly, if it was me in charge of this, I literally would have just remade the same exact design for the inside, and hell, allow them to be backwards compatible. Get 6 or 8 new masks that you can use back in G1. That would have been fantastic, but that's not the reality we live in. On top of that, you can take the conversation further over on Discord, or check out the Instagram or Patreon if you want to help support the channel and videos like this. I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care.